All right, let's talk setup. Now, when you're setting up your equipment, we've got to think about two things. One is, what sort of story are you looking to tell? And then two, how much time and effort do you realistically and repeatedly have available to you? You want to be consistent, right? We want to be able to create a setup that is sustainable to do over and over and over. The last thing we want is to create a workflow that gets in the way of us actually enjoying the experience. The number one thing is that we're out experiencing these stories. All we're trying to do is capture them along the way. Now, so we've got to make sure that whatever process, whatever setup we come up with enables us to be able to enjoy the trip as well as capturing it in the way that we want to tell it. Let's have a look at GoPros. Obviously in the background there, you could see that my helmet was there. I've got my stinky old gloves in there. We'll get them out of the way. Okay, so I have a GoPro Hero 9 on the front of my helmet. A nice basic setup here. Now, your most basic setup that you can go with and still tell a fantastic story is to mount the GoPro on the front of the helmet with no microphones. Just mount it, basic, simple, straightforward, just throw it on the front and then capture away you go. Now, the thing about mounting on the front of the helmet is that once it's there, we can capture other stuff by just utilizing the helmet, right? So just when you stop at a ride, just grab a couple of shots of the environment, right? And you can just keep it mounted on the front of the helmet, right? The helmet makes it nice and easy. The other advantage of the helmet, of course, is you can just throw it somewhere and then use it as a tripod, right? So you can drop it onto your mirror and you can talk to the camera if you want to talk to the camera, right? So there's so many different ways. So that is hugely versatile and the most simple way that you can do things. Now, of course, the downside of that setup is that is wind, right? So wind noise is going to be a problem. But when you're capturing basic videos is you can always just hide the wind noise with music. Right? While you're riding along, just show the scenery, show what you're doing, but you just get rid of the noise on the bike. Don't use the audio and instead use music to fill it in instead, right? That's the most basic. The next level to the setup, which is what I've done here, is I'm using the media mod on this one, but previously I had, with the Hero 7, I had the audio adapter on the side of the helmet, but it was the same thing, same principle. The media mod, all that is there for is for me to plug my lav mic into there. Now, inside the helmet, I then have a lav mic set up in there. Now, of course, everyone's helmet's different, so you set it up in a way that suits you. And I just run the cable in there and back through to the front. That's it, right? Nice and simple. Now I've got the center thing on the side here, which gives me something to actually connect it to, which makes it nice and simple. But all you're doing is using a lav mic and then plugging that into your media mod, plugging that into your camera. That's it. Nice and simple. Now, of course, what that does is it makes it really easy for me to be able to talk to the camera while I'm riding, but it also cuts out the wind noise and you can capture some more noise from the bike itself, which sounds much nicer.
If you look that way, you'll notice big dark clouds. Just before I left, I got a notification on my phone from Willy Weather saying severe weather warning.
But telling the story while you're riding is fantastic as well. The other downside of that setup is to remember that that's the only angle you're capturing while you're riding. And later on, we'll go into what we capture and we'll talk about capturing all different angles, getting some B-roll and stuff like that. That helps mix things up. But that's just one thing to consider. If you've got the opportunity to put that same camera somewhere else and mount it in a couple of different places to capture different angles while you're on your ride, then fantastic. Another option too is capturing your audio in a different way. So I've got a lav mic set up here, with an external audio recorder. You could place that somewhere else on the bike, put it inside your jacket. I've seen a lot of people clip a lav mic to the back of their jackets, which works as well. So you're capturing a bit of noise while blocking out the wind. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can capture audio, and using if you have the opportunity to get an external audio device, then you can get a little more funky with it. All right, ND filters. Let's talk about ND filters. So do you need an ND filter? Firstly, no, you don't. There's only one reason you want it, is you want an ND filter if you want it to be more cinematic. That's the only reason you need one. The pro of using ND filters is that you can slow down the shutter speed so you get a nice blurriness in the shots. It makes it look like it's going faster. It makes it look smoother while it's going faster. It looks nicer on the eye. Do you need it? No. Do you want it? Up to you. The downside of using an ND filter is you've got to constantly think about the fact that you're using an ND filter, right? Is it too dark for this filter? ND filters primarily are used for cinema, and you think about the environment that people are recording cinema in, it's kind of like this, right? I've got a light there, I've got a light there, and I've got a light there, and they're all consistent. They're set up and they're not going to move, and the light source is not going to change, right? When we're on a motorbike, the light source is changing every half second, right? So that's the downside of using ND filters, is that you've got to think about them. So on our ride to Moon and Flat, it started to get dark as we were approaching, so I had to stop and change ND filters. If you want to use ND filters, that's really the question you've got to ask yourself is, do I want the hassle of using an ND filter? Now, once you get used to them and you know which ones suit what situations, then it becomes less of a hassle. You can kind of just look outside and go, oh, this is definitely a 16, an ND16 or an ND8. And really, they're the two that I use. Anyway, let's jump out on the bike and have a look at what this actually looks like. Now, as I said before, key thing about the ND filter is it worth it? Does it make it easier for you? Does it give you the look you want? And are you willing to take on that extra effort that comes with using them? And this is what we're doing, putting sunglasses on the camera, so creating a low light situation. Low light and stabilization don't like each other very much. So that's another thing to consider. Because remember, as we've been saying, the key thing is that you're having fun, right? The storytelling that you're doing, the capturing of this story, comes second to actually enjoying the moment, right? So if you're then worrying about these takes you out of the moment, then I would suggest don't use them. If you quite happily go along and use them and it adds to it, you actually think, oh yeah, I'm capturing something really cinematic here, then do use it. Yeah, it's totally up to you. It's a creative choice.